In the year 2237, the Earth's main orbital station, called Horizon Gate, floated above the blue and white curve of the planet. It was the largest human-built structure in space, a hub where starships from distant worlds came to trade, meet, and form agreements. That week, the station prepared for a visit unlike any other. The Kalari Empire, a powerful alien nation that ruled over dozens of worlds, was sending its queen for the first time. Her name was Alvara, and her presence alone was enough to stir. Whispers among soldiers, officers, and diplomats. Stories about Queen Alvara had spread across the galaxy. She was said to be proud, sharp-tongued, and unwilling to be questioned. Her empire had ships so advanced that even Earth's strongest fleets could not match them. For some, her arrival meant opportunity. For others, it meant walking carefully and making no mistakes. In one of the station's security rooms, a young human guard named Daniel adjusted the straps of his uniform. He was tall but not imposing, with calm brown eyes and quiet movements. Daniel had been assigned to the Queen's personal escort. It was an honor, though he had not asked for it. Many guards had hoped for the position, believing it might bring fame or promotion. Daniel, however, simply thought of it as another duty. "You'll be part of the front line when she steps off her ship," the security chief told him. "Remember, no sudden moves, no unnecessary talk. She values formality, and for the love of Earth, do not stare." Daniel nodded without argument. He was used to keeping quiet. Talking was never his strongest skill, and he preferred to let others take the attention. Still, he understood the importance of his task. This was not only about guarding a visitor. This was about protecting the image of Earth in front of one of the most powerful rulers in known space. The day of her arrival came quickly. The docking bay was prepared with shining floors and banners of both Earth and the Solari Empire hanging from the walls. Security stood in perfect lines, their boots polished, their faces expressionless. Daniel took his position at the edge of the main walkway, eyes forward, hands behind his back. A deep hum filled the air as the Queen's starship entered the bay. The vessel was unlike any human ship Daniel had seen. It was shaped like a silver crescent, its surface alive with faint blue lines that pulsed gently. The ship touched down with a smoothness that felt almost unreal. The docking clamps locked in place and a ramp extended. A group of Solari guards stepped out first. They were tall, wearing armor that shimmered like glass, yet looked as strong as steel. Behind them, a figure in flowing dark silver robes appeared. Her steps were slow but certain, each movement carrying an air of control. This was Queen Alvara. Her skin had a soft metallic tone, as though silver and light were woven together. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, and they moved over the crowd with the calm of someone who had seen 100 such gatherings before. The air in the bay seemed to tighten. Even without speaking, her presence commanded attention. The station's commander stepped forward to greet her, offering formal words of welcome. Alvara listened, nodding slightly, though her eyes seemed to measure every detail of the bay and its people. When her gaze passed over Daniel, he expected her to look away immediately, but for a moment, she did not. Her eyes held his with a faint spark of curiosity before moving on. The commander began leading her down the walkway toward the main station halls. Daniel fell into step with the rest of the escort. He kept his focus on the path ahead, but he could sense her presence beside him more than anyone else in the room. She spoke briefly with the commander about the planned meetings, her voice clear and precise. As they moved deeper into the station, a small disturbance occurred. One of the bay's overhead lights flickered and went out, followed by another. For a moment, the corridor ahead was cast into dim shadows. Some of the station staff hesitated, unsure of what had happened. Without thinking, Daniel stepped forward, moving slightly ahead of the Queen. He spoke in a low voice, guiding her to the clearer side of the walkway where the remaining lights still shone. She followed without comment, and within a minute, the Lights returned to normal. The rest of the walk passed without trouble. The Queen was taken to her prepared quarters, a large suite with a wide view of Earth through its main window. Her guards stood at their posts as human staff brought in supplies and gifts. Daniel remained near the door, silent as always. Alvara glanced toward him once while speaking to one of her attendants. She was used to guards who tried to impress her, either with forced conversation or with overly formal flattery. Yet this one said nothing, asked for nothing, and simply did his job. There was no nervous smile, no eager nod, only steady watchfulness. She found it unusual, though she would not admit it aloud. Later that evening, Daniel was relieved by another guard. As he walked through the quiet corridors toward the security barracks, he thought of the Queen's sharp eyes and the way she had carried herself. She was unlike any person he had ever seen, yet he had no reason to think about her beyond his duty, or so he told himself. Back in her quarters, Queen Alvara stood at the window, watching the curve of the planet below. The humans had greeted her with all the expected ceremony, but that quiet guard's calm manner lingered in her thoughts for reasons she could not explain. She had come for politics and trade, not for curiosity about a human soldier. Still, a small question remained in her mind. Why had he looked at her without the usual fear or awe? The station outside continued its steady orbit, unaware that a connection, small and unnoticed, had begun to form between two very different lives. The next morning on Horizon Gate Station began with the usual sound of soft alarms marking shift changes. In the Queen's private wing, human and Solari guards stood together in silent coordination. Daniel had been assigned to the morning watch outside her quarters. He stood near the tall silver door, hands behind his back, his eyes steady on the hallway. The station's commander arrived with 2 aides to escort the Queen to the council chamber for her first round of talks. The door slid open, and Queen Alvara stepped out, wearing a different robe than the day before. This one was deep blue with faint silver patterns that shifted slowly, like water under sunlight. Her crown was a thin arc of metal resting against her forehead, simple yet unmistakable. She glanced at Daniel as she passed. It was not a long look, but it was enough to make him aware that she had noticed him again. The escort began moving toward the central lifts. Daniel walked to her left, 1 pace behind, ready to act if needed. The halls were wide and clean, their walls lined with soft lighting. Crew members and officials who saw the Queen quickly stepped aside, some bowing, others simply keeping their eyes down. Alvara moved with calm confidence, her steps neither rushed nor slow. Halfway to the council chamber, an unexpected flicker ran through the station's power grid. The lights dimmed, then brightened again. The lift doors ahead failed to open at first, and a faint hum from the systems faded for several seconds. Daniel's eyes scanned the area, looking for any sign of danger. "This is unusual," one of the Solari guards murmured to another in their own language. The commander turned to an aide. "Check the status with engineering." Before the aide could respond, Alvara's gaze turned toward Daniel. "Does your station often fail like this?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight edge. Daniel met her eyes for a brief moment before answering. "Not often, Your Majesty. When it happens, it is usually a small fault. The crew will have it fixed quickly." Her violet eyes narrowed slightly, as though testing the weight of his words. "You sound certain." "I am certain," he replied, simply. The lift doors finally opened with a soft chime. The group stepped inside, the faint hum of the machinery returning to normal. The Queen said nothing further, but Daniel noticed her eyes lingered on him for a moment before turning away. Council chamber was a tall, circular room with a domed ceiling, showing a live projection of the Earth below. Representatives from both the Solari Empire and Earth sat at a long, curved table. Daniel and the other guards remained at the edges of the room, silent observers while discussions began. Talks moved slowly, with polite but careful exchanges between leaders. The Queen's voice carried authority as she spoke about trade routes, shared defense, and technology exchanges. Though she was respectful, her words left no doubt that she spoke from a position of power. The human representatives chose their responses carefully. Daniel kept his eyes moving, scanning faces and watching the entrances. A guard's work was not about comfort. It was about readiness for the moment something might go wrong. After 2 hours, the meeting paused for a short break. The Queen stepped away from the table and moved toward one of the tall windows that looked out over the planet. Her Solari guards followed, but she lifted a hand to keep them at a distance. Daniel, however, remained where he was, closer than the others. "Tell me," she said quietly without turning, "do you enjoy guarding me? Or is it simply your assigned task?" Daniel hesitated. "It is my task, Your Majesty. Enjoyment is not part of my training." This made her turn her head slightly toward him. "So you do not seek honor or reward for it?" "No," he said. "My duty is to protect you while you are here. That is enough." Her lips curved very slightly, almost a smile, but not quite. "Most who stand in my guard speak endlessly of loyalty, hoping for notice. You do not." "I am not here for notice," Daniel replied. For a moment there was quiet between them. The voices of the other leaders discussing matters filled the chamber, but at the window it felt still. Alvarez studied his face as if trying to read something in it that his words did not reveal. The break ended, and the meeting resumed. Daniel returned to his post, though he could feel her gaze pass over him once or twice during the next round of talks. By the end of the day, the Queen had completed her formal schedule. She was escorted back to her quarters. Daniel followed as part of the protective line, and once she was inside, he took his position at the door again. An hour later, a soft chime from inside called him in. He entered quietly. Alvara stood near, a small table where a pot of steaming herbal drink had been set by one of her attendants. She dismissed the attendant with a wave, leaving only herself and Daniel in the room. "Sit," she said, pointing to a seat opposite her. Her tone left no space for refusal. Daniel sat, unsure why she had asked for him. She poured the drink into 2 cups and handed one to him. He accepted it with a small nod. "I wish to know more about your world," she said, "not from books or formal talks, from you." Daniel took a careful sip before answering. "Earth is large and varied. Many lands, many climates, many people. I was born near the coast in a small town. The air smelled of salt, and you could hear the sea even at night." She listened, eyes focused on him. "And your people, in such towns, do they think often of the stars?" "Some do," he said. "Some are content to live where they are. I wanted to see beyond, so I joined the security forces for space duty." Her gaze softened slightly, though her posture remained regal. "You speak plainly. That is rare in my court." Daniel only shrugged lightly. "I have no reason to speak otherwise." For the first time since arriving on the station, Queen Alvara let out a short, quiet breath that could almost have been a laugh. "Perhaps," she said, "this visit will not be entirely tiresome after all." She stood, signaling that their conversation was over, and Daniel rose as well. As he stepped back toward the door, he felt a shift, small but clear, in the way she looked at him. It was not the look of a ruler seeing just another guard. It was the look of someone who had found a puzzle worth solving. Outside, the station's corridors remained calm. But inside the Queen's quarters, something had begun to change between the proud alien ruler and the quiet human soldier. The next 2 days on Horizon Gate Station passed with a steady rhythm. Queen Alvara attended her formal meetings with Earth's leaders, visited the station's science wing, and toured the orbital gardens that circled the outer ring. Every moment, her guards, both Kalari and human, remained close. Daniel was often among them. He kept his quiet nature, speaking only when necessary. Yet each time Alvara's gaze passed over him, it lingered for a second longer than before. She noticed that he never tried to stand out, never sought to impress her. He did not bow too deeply, nor did he speak in overly formal words. This was unusual to her. On the third morning, the Queen's schedule included a walk through the station's cultural hall, a section where art, history, and traditions from many worlds were displayed. She was escorted by the station commander, her celery aides, and a mix of guards. Daniel was positioned to her right, just close enough to hear if she spoke. They passed sculptures made by human hands, images of old Earth cities, and paintings of alien landscapes gifted by visiting species. Alvara's eyes moved over each display with the calm of one who had seen countless works of art. But when she stopped before a small case holding seashells from Earth's oceans, she tilted her head slightly. "These are from your world," she said quietly. Daniel stepped closer. "Yes, from the southern coasts. The patterns form naturally as the shells grow." Alvara looked at the pale spirals inside the glass. "They are simple, yet they are pleasing to look at." "Many people collect them," Daniel replied. "Some believe each shell holds the sound of the sea." She turned her head slightly toward him. "Is that true?" "It is not magic," he said, "but if you hold it to your ear, you can hear a sound like the waves." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment. Then she moved on to the next display. The commander resumed speaking about the station's cultural exchange programs, but Daniel sensed that her attention was not entirely on the commander's words. Later, when they reached the far end of the hall, she slowed her pace until she was walking beside Daniel. Her voice was low, meant only for him. "You have spoken of the sea before. You were born near it." "Yes," he said. "It was always close." "Do you miss it?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Sometimes. Space is different. It is wide and endless, but it does not smell of salt or feel warm on your skin like sunlight on water." Her gaze stayed on him for a moment longer, then she looked forward again. "Your people seem to value such small details." "They are not small to us," Daniel replied. "They are what make life worth remembering." For the first time that day, Alvara allowed a slight smile to touch her lips. Perhaps that is why humans are difficult to predict. The group moved on, but the exchange left a quiet trace between them. That evening, Alvara requested her meal be served in a smaller dining chamber rather than the large ceremonial hall. She also requested that Daniel remain as part of the watch in the room. The Solari guards stayed near the walls while she sat at a long, polished table. Daniel stood by the entrance, alert but calm. After a few minutes, she looked up from her meal. "Do you always eat alone when on duty?" "Yes," Daniel said. "It is standard for guards to eat separately." She set down her utensil. "You will not eat with me, even if I order it?" Daniel hesitated. "If you order it, I will. But I am here to guard, not to share the table." Her expression showed a trace of curiosity. "You truly see no value in gaining favor with me?" "I see value in doing my job well," he answered simply. She studied him for a long moment before returning to her meal. "Interesting." The following day, during a tour of the station's observation deck, the Queen stood before the massive glass wall that looked out into space. Stars filled the darkness, and far below, Earth glowed like a jewel. "Your world is beautiful from here," she said softly. Daniel stood nearby. "It is, but it feels different when you are standing on it." "How so?" she asked. "From here. It looks perfect," he explained. "On the ground, It is louder, busier, full of life. You see the details, the movement, the changes. Alvara's violet eyes reflected the starlight. Your words make it sound alive. It is, Daniel said. Like a living thing that holds all of us. The queen turned toward him, her expression unreadable. You speak of your world with pride. Yes, he replied. It is home. For a moment, she seemed to be weighing something in her thoughts. Then she looked back at the stars. Perhaps I should see it not from above, but from within. Daniel did not respond, unsure if she was serious or only speaking to herself. Over the next few days, she began to ask him small questions whenever they were in quieter moments, about human customs, about celebrations, about the foods people cooked in their homes. She asked about music, about why humans sang even when alone. Daniel answered each question with the same calm honesty. He did not embellish or try to impress her, but the way he described simple things carried a certain weight. Alvara began to realize that in her life as a ruler, surrounded by advisors and warriors, she rarely heard such straightforward truths. One evening, as the station's lights dimmed for the night cycle, Alvara stood at her window looking at the earth below. Daniel was on watch inside the room. Without looking at him, she spoke. In my empire, a ruler must always appear strong and beyond reach. To show too much interest in others is seen as weakness. Daniel remained silent, waiting for her to continue. But you, she said, speak to me as if I am simply another person to guard. I speak to you with respect, Daniel said, but I do not believe respect means fear. Her eyes turned toward him, a faint light of amusement in them. Then perhaps you are different from most who serve in my presence. She returned her gaze to the planet, and the room fell quiet again. Daniel did not move or speak further, but he felt that something in the space between them had shifted. Neither of them would admit it aloud, but the proud queen and the shy guard were no longer just ruler and protector. A thread of curiosity had begun to weave between them, light and almost invisible, yet strong enough to draw their attention back to one another again and again. The Queen's visit to Horizon Gate was meant to be calm and carefully planned. Every movement, every meeting, every public appearance had been arranged in advance. Yet events have a way of breaking plans, and that truth arrived one afternoon, when Queen Alvara was scheduled to travel to a nearby sector for a diplomatic session aboard a smaller shuttle. The shuttle bay on Horizon Gate was quiet, except for the sound of engineers making final checks. Daniel stood with the Queen's escort team, watching as she entered the craft. The vessel was smaller than her grand starship, but still sleek and elegant, built for speed and comfort. Daniel took his seat along the side wall, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. The trip began smoothly. Through the small viewing panels, the endless dark of space stretched out, dotted with stars. Alvara sat near the front, speaking in low tones to one of her aides. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily. Then, without warning, the steady hum shifted into a harsher sound. The lights flickered once, twice, and a sharp voice came over the pilot's channel. Unknown craft approaching. They are not responding. To calls. Daniel's posture straightened at once. He looked toward the window and saw 3 dark shapes moving quickly through the stars. They were small ships, but their movement was sharp and aggressive. The Queen's celery guards reacted, instantly moving closer to her. The pilot's voice grew tenser. They are locking on. Possible boarding attempt. One of the Queen's aides whispered urgently to her in the Solari language. She listened but kept her expression calm. Then she turned her eyes toward Daniel, who was already scanning the shuttle's layout for defensive positions. The first jolt came as one of the enemy ships fired a disabling shot, shaking the shuttle. The lights dimmed, and the hum of the engines grew uneven. The pilot shouted that the attackers were trying to force them to halt. They want me alive, Alvara said, her voice cold but steady. Ransom, perhaps, or leverage against my empire. The Solari guards moved to form a wall around her, but Daniel stepped forward. Your Majesty, they will try to breach the main hatch. We have seconds. One of the Solari guards gave him a sharp look. This is our task, human. Daniel ignored the remark and addressed the Queen. If I draw them away from the entry point, the shuttle's defenses can activate fully. They will have to focus on me instead of forcing a breach. Alvara's eyes narrowed. You would leave your position near me? Yes, he said without hesitation. To protect you, I will put myself between you and them. The Solari guards exchanged glances, surprised by his certainty. The Queen's gaze held his for a long moment. Then she gave a single nod. Do it. Daniel moved quickly to the forward section of the shuttle near the hatch. He grabbed a compact shield from the wall mount and braced himself as the attackers began cutting into the outer door. The sound of metal heating and splitting filled the air. The moment the hatch blew open, two armored figures tried to step inside. Daniel surged forward, using the shield to slam into the first, knocking the intruder backward into the second. A shot from the shuttle's defense system struck one of their weapons, sending sparks through the air. The attackers shifted their aim toward him, just as Daniel had planned. He ducked behind the shield, drawing their fire away from the Queen's position. The Solari guards behind him fired precise shots, forcing the intruders to retreat toward their ship. Another jolt rocked the shuttle as one enemy craft pulled back, hit by a defense burst. The remaining attackers fired one last shot toward Daniel, which struck his shield with a heavy impact that forced him to his knees. He pushed back to his feet and kept his stance firm until the hatch sealed again. The pilot's voice came over the channel. We are clear. They are retreating. Daniel lowered the shield, breathing slowly to steady himself. He turned to see the Queen standing a few paces away, her eyes fixed on him. You risked your life without hesitation, she said. It is my duty, he replied. Her gaze held his, unreadable, but there was a shift in her tone when she spoke again. Duty, yes, but there was more in your choice. You placed yourself between me and danger when others might have stayed in place. Daniel did not answer immediately. Finally, he said, You are my responsibility here. No matter the risk, I protect you first. One of the Solari guards stepped forward, his expression respectful. Your actions were unexpected, human, but effective. The shuttle continued on its course, the tension slowly fading. Daniel returned to his seat, his shield now dented but still functional. He rested it beside him, his eyes still alert for any further threat. When they finally reached the meeting point in the nearby sector, the Queen conducted her business with her usual regal composure, but several times Daniel caught her looking. In his direction, her expression thoughtful. On the return trip, the Queen called him forward to stand near her. Tell me, she said in a quieter voice than before, why do you not speak of your bravery? Others would make it known, perhaps even demand reward. Daniel shook his head. A guard's work is not for reward. It is for the safety of the one we guard. That is enough. For a moment, her violet eyes softened. Perhaps in your simplicity, there is a strength my people sometimes forget. The rest of the journey back to Horizon Gate passed without trouble. When they landed, the station's commander was informed of the attack and the Queen's safe return. Reports were filed, defenses reviewed, and protocols adjusted. But for Queen Alvara, one detail stood out above all others, that a quiet human guard had stepped forward when danger came, without seeking notice, without hesitation, and without fear. That night, as she stood at the wide window of her quarters, she thought again of the dented shield and the steady eyes of the man who had carried it. For the first time in her long reign, she wondered if true strength could come not from power, but from loyalty without condition. The attack on the shuttle had changed something between Queen Alvara and Daniel, though neither spoke of it directly. Life on Horizon Gate Station returned to its normal routine of meetings, tours, and diplomatic events, but the Queen now seemed to take a more personal interest in her human guard. In the days after the incident, she often requested Daniel's presence in smaller, less formal settings. Sometimes, it was while she walked the station's gardens. Other times, it was during private viewings of cultural exhibits. She never gave an official reason, yet her Solari guards noticed the pattern. One afternoon, Alvara asked to visit the Arboretum on the lower ring. It was a vast dome filled with plants from both Earth and Solari worlds. Sunlight simulators cast a warm glow over green leaves, flowers, and small pools of water. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of soil and blossoms. Daniel walked a step behind her as they followed a winding path between tall trees. The Solari guards kept a respectful distance, giving their queen space. "These trees," she said, looking up at the swaying branches, "are from your home world?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "They are oaks. They can live for hundreds of years." Her eyes lingered on the leaves. "In my empire, we measure strength in fleets and armies, but here you measure it in the life of a tree." "Strength can take many forms," Daniel said. "A tree endures storms, grows even in poor soil, and gives shelter to others." Alvara glanced at him, as if weighing the meaning of his words. "You speak as though you believe endurance is greater than power." "I think endurance is a kind of power," Daniel said simply. They stopped beside a small pond where pale fish moved slowly under the surface. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of water and distant bird song from hidden speakers filled the air. Finally, she said, "In the shuttle, when you stood between me and danger, I saw no fear in your eyes. Do you truly feel none?" Daniel shook his head. "I felt it. Fear is natural, but it does not decide my actions." Her gaze held his for a long moment. "Then perhaps it is not just duty that makes you protect me." Daniel looked away, unsure how to answer. She seemed to sense his hesitation and let the matter rest. They continued walking, their steps quiet on the soft path. That evening, Alvara invited Daniel to join her in the observation lounge. The space was empty except for them, its curved glass walls showing the endless night of space. Stars shimmered like distant fires, and the earth hung below, its clouds drifting slowly. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back. "When I first came here, I expected formality and caution from every human I met. You give me something different." "You give me honesty without fear," Daniel replied. "I treat you with respect, Your Majesty. But I do not think fear is the same as respect." Her violet eyes softened slightly. "In my court, no one speaks to me so directly unless they seek something in return. You seek nothing." "I already have what I seek," Daniel said. "A purpose." She studied him quietly before turning her gaze back to the stars. "You are strange for a soldier," she said at last. Over the next week, their conversations grew longer and more personal. Alvara told him pieces of her life in the Solari Empire, how she had been trained from childhood to rule, how every word she spoke was weighed by those around her. She admitted she had few moments where she could simply speak without the weight of her title. Daniel, in turn, told her about his small coastal town, about his mother who tended a garden and his father who fished. He spoke of the smell of rain on warm pavement, of the quiet after a storm, and of the nights when the stars were bright over the water. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Alvara asked to take a walk through the station's quietest corridors. Daniel accompanied her, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. "I wonder," she said after a while, "if I could walk like this on my own world without being followed." "You could," Daniel said, "but perhaps not without being watched." She gave a small nod. "Yes, always watched, always judged." They passed a viewport showing the curve of the planet. She stopped there, resting her hand lightly on the frame. "Here with you, I feel something unusual." "What is that?" he asked. "A sense that I am not the queen for a moment. Only Alvara." Daniel did not answer right away. "If you wish, I can treat you as only Alvara while I guard you." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "Perhaps that is what I already see when I look at you." The moment lingered between them, unspoken, yet clear. Their bond did not go unnoticed. Some of the Queen's own guards exchanged quiet glances, and a few of the human staff began to whisper. Still, neither Alvara nor Daniel spoke openly about the change. It remained in the small moments, a shared look, a pause in conversation, a rare smile. One night during the station's night cycle, Alvara stood again at the wide window of her quarters. Daniel was on watch nearby. She spoke without turning. "When I return to my world, I will remember this station not for its halls or its ceremonies, but for these quiet hours." Daniel met her gaze in the reflection of the glass. "Then I am glad to be here for them." For a queen who had built her life behind walls of power and pride, it was a strange thing to feel those walls shifting. And for a guard who had always kept his distance, it was strange to feel himself stepping closer without meaning to. The proud alien ruler and the shy human soldier had begun to see each other not as titles or duties, but as people. And that, perhaps, was more dangerous than any attack they might face. The day of the final banquet on Horizon Gate had arrived. The grand hall gleamed with polished floors, softly glowing lights, and banners of both Earth and the Solari Empire hanging from the ceiling. Leaders, diplomats, and dignitaries from dozens of worlds gathered to witness the closing of the Queen's visit. Queen Alvara entered the hall with her usual air of confidence. Her long silver-blue robe flowed behind her, and the thin metal crown rested on her forehead like a shard of starlight. She walked with precision, each step echoing softly on the marble floor. The crowd rose and bowed in respect, though many did so with cautious curiosity, wondering what the proud ruler might say during the banquet. Daniel was stationed at the far side of the hall, alert but unobtrusive. He had maintained a careful watch over the Queen all day, but he felt something unusual in the air. There was an energy that he could not name, as if this banquet held more than ceremony. Alvara took her place at the head table. The dinner began formally with polite exchanges and careful etiquette. The Queen spoke of diplomacy, trade, and shared futures. Her words were precise, measured, and full of authority. Yet Daniel noticed the small glances she cast in his direction, subtle but unmistakable. As the main course concluded, Alvara rose from her seat. The hall fell silent, everyone instinctively aware that she would speak. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I have come to your station not only as a ruler of the Solari Empire, but as a guest of your people," she began, her voice strong yet carrying a warmth rarely heard. "I have met many humans, and I have observed their courage, their creativity, and their quiet determination." Heads nodded and whispers spread across the hall. Many of the dignitaries expected praise for Earth's technology or its diplomats. Yet Alvara's words carried a different tone. "But among those I have observed," she continued, "one individual stands apart. One human has shown courage and loyalty in ways that surpass all expectation. His name is Daniel." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel's eyes widened. He had not expected his name to be spoken, certainly not by the Queen herself. Alvara's violet eyes scanned the room, finally settling on him. "During a recent threat to my life, Daniel stepped forward when many would have hesitated. He risked himself without hesitation or thought of reward, placing the safety of others above his own. In this he has demonstrated a strength I admire more than titles, more than power, and more than any fleet of ships." Daniel remained still, his expression a mixture of surprise and disbelief. He had only done what he felt was right. Never expecting recognition, and certainly not in such a public way. Alvara's gaze softened as she addressed him directly. "Daniel, your actions have taught me something valuable. Strength is not always measured in power or command. Sometimes it is measured in courage, humility, and integrity." The crowd watched in silence, many trying to understand the unusual moment. Alvara's words were not just praise. They were a personal acknowledgement that crossed the boundaries of duty and title. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, she continued. "I hereby name Daniel an honorary guardian of the Solari throne. He is not only a protector, but also a symbol of the qualities we must value in all our allies. May his loyalty and courage inspire all who serve beside him." Whispers turned into audible astonishment. Diplomats looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Some bowed respectfully, others clapped slowly, still processing the meaning of the Queen's declaration. Daniel's face flushed with surprise. He had not expected this recognition, and he struggled to find words. "Your Majesty," he began, but Alvara held up a hand, signaling him to remain silent. "You do not need to speak," she said. "Your actions have spoken for you, more clearly than any words ever could." As the banquet continued, the atmosphere had changed. Where once formality and ceremony ruled, now there was a quiet respect and curiosity. The dignitaries saw the Queen in a new light, not just as a proud and powerful ruler, but as someone capable of recognizing true merit without prejudice. Later, when the formal part of the banquet ended and guests moved to smaller gatherings, Alvara asked Daniel to walk with her to the observation balcony. Outside, the station floated above the planet, its lights twinkling like stars below the stars. "You handled yourself well," she said quietly. The entire hall saw it. "Do you know what that means?" Daniel shook his head. "I only did what was right. I did not expect this." "Exactly," she said, her voice softening. "You acted without expectation of reward, and because of that, your courage has meaning far beyond what you know. Many will speak of it for years, and I will not forget it myself." Daniel looked at her, sensing the unusual warmth in her words. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said simply. She turned her gaze to him, her expression almost hesitant. "I am learning something about humans. Sometimes what they value most is not wealth, rank, or power, but honesty, courage, and devotion. You embody all of these." Daniel felt a quiet sense of pride, though he kept his composure. "I only try to do my duty," he replied. She smiled faintly, and that is what makes it extraordinary. The night passed, and the Queen returned to her quarters. Daniel remained nearby, as he always did, watching over her. But he no longer felt the same distance he had felt at the beginning of her visit. Something had shifted. For Alvara, the declaration had been more than a public act. It had been a moment of personal revelation. She realized that the quiet human guard, who had seemed unremarkable at first, had opened a new way of seeing the world for her. Strength and loyalty could come from places she had never expected. The news of her declaration spread quickly through Horizon Gate and beyond. Human staff spoke of Daniel's bravery and the Queen's recognition with admiration. The Solari guards were impressed, some even a little unsettled, by the personal attention their Queen had shown. But neither Alvara nor Daniel spoke openly about the deeper bond forming between them. It remained in the small moments, a glance during a formal meeting, a quiet word in a hallway, or the simple presence of one near the other. As the station settled into the calm of night, both stood at the edge of the observation deck, looking at the stars. There was a quiet understanding between them now, unspoken but clear. The proud queen and the shy guard had shared a moment that changed everything, and the impact of that moment would continue to grow in ways neither could yet fully understand. The days following the banquet passed quietly, yet for Queen Alvara and Daniel, nothing was quite the same. The Queen's public recognition of his courage had changed his role in the eyes of the station and the Empire, but more importantly, it had changed the quiet connection growing between them. Daniel continued his duties with the same vigilance, but he noticed subtle differences in the way the Queen regarded him. Her glances were softer, her instructions less formal when she spoke directly to him, and she seemed to value his presence not just for protection, but for his company. One morning, the Queen invited Daniel to accompany her on a private inspection of the station's engineering sector. The place was vast and complex, filled with machinery, humming energy conduits, and moving platforms. Solari engineers worked alongside human technicians, monitoring systems and adjusting controls. This sector powers much of Horizon Gate, Alvara explained. It is the heart of the station. Daniel nodded, moving slightly ahead to survey the area for any irregularities. Everything looks stable, he said. The energy cores are running at optimal levels. Alvara followed, observing the machinery with curiosity. You speak simply, yet your words carry assurance. Most engineers would take pride in demonstrating complex systems, but you present facts plainly. I focus on accuracy, Daniel said. Complex words can confuse the truth. She studied him for a long moment, as if seeing him anew. Perhaps that is why I find your presence calming. In this place, clarity is rare, yet you carry it naturally. For the first time since arriving on the station, Alvara laughed softly, a sound like wind through the trees on Earth. It is strange to feel peace when I should be calculating politics, alliances, and threats. Yet you make it easier. Daniel shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the praise but unable to hide the faint warmth rising in him. I only do what I can to ensure your safety, Your Majesty. She looked at him directly, her violet eyes unwavering. And yet you do more than that. You offer honesty, steadiness, and courage. Those are rarer than any weapon in the galaxy. As they moved through the sector, a minor alert sounded. A small energy fluctuation had appeared in a secondary power grid. Engineers rushed to assess it, and Daniel instinctively stepped closer. To the Queen, shielding her from the nearest machinery. It is minor, he said quietly. We are not in danger. Alvara glanced at him, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. You react without hesitation, yet without alarm. That is a rare quality. The issue was resolved quickly, and the engineers returned to their stations. Alvara and Daniel resumed their walk through the corridors. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of machinery and the distant echoes of activity filled the air. Finally, Alvara stopped before a large viewport overlooking space. The station floated against the dark canvas, Earth glowing beneath them. She turned toward Daniel. There is something I must tell you, she said. Her voice was quieter than usual, almost vulnerable. Daniel met her gaze, alert. What is it, Your Majesty? She hesitated, then spoke with unusual honesty. I did not expect to feel this way about anyone. I have spent my life surrounded by advisors, guards, and diplomats. They respect me, they fear me, they obey me. But no one ever sees me as Alvara. Daniel remained silent, understanding that this was a moment of trust. But you see me differently, she continued. You treat me not as a distant ruler, but as someone real. That is rare. And it has made me realize something about myself. Daniel waited, his attention fully on her. I care for you, she said, finally. Not for your duty alone, but for who you are. I care for the courage, the steadiness, and the honesty I see in you. You have become more than a guard to me, Daniel. You have become someone I value deeply. Daniel felt a shift in his chest. He had never imagined a ruler, so proud and commanding, would speak to him this way. Yet he had long admired her from a distance, respected her for her intelligence, her strength, and her fairness. Now her words touched him in ways that made his heart race. "Your Majesty," he began, then corrected himself. "Alvara." She placed a hand lightly on his arm, stopping him. "Call me Alvara. Here, now. Not the queen, not the ruler, just me." Daniel swallowed and nodded. "Alvara, I care for you as well. I have felt something growing since the moment I first met you. Your courage, your wisdom, and even your moments of doubt. They have all drawn me closer." Her violet eyes softened, a smile spreading across her face. "Then we see the same truth. And yet, this is delicate. Our worlds, our duties, our responsibilities, they complicate such feelings." "I understand," Daniel said, "but perhaps the heart knows what the mind cannot ignore. We can face what comes, together." Alvara nodded. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel something beyond power and protocol. The human guard at her side was no longer just a protector. He was a companion, a confidant, and a partner in ways she had never expected. Over the following days, their bond grew quietly but steadily. Small gestures, a hand extended to help her down a step, a shared look across a crowded hall, moments of private conversation, built trust and understanding. The station noticed the subtle closeness, but none dared speak aloud. It was clear that this connection was mutual, and no one could interrupt it without permission. When the time came for Alvara to return to her empire, she invited Daniel to accompany her to the starship dock. The larger starship that would carry her back to Solari space gleamed under the station lights. Before stepping aboard, she turned to him. "I do not know what the future holds for us. My world is far and my duties are many, yet know this. I will not forget you, Daniel. You have changed my life." Daniel reached out, taking her hand gently. "And you have changed mine, Alvara. I will stand by you no matter the distance or the trials ahead." A faint smile lit her face, filled with pride and warmth. "Then let us face the stars together in whatever way we can." As the starship lifted off, the two of them stood side by side, watching Horizon Gate recede beneath them. The bond between the proud alien queen and the quiet human guard had grown into something that no fleet, no station, and no ceremony could define. It was a bond beyond worlds, beyond titles, and beyond expectation. In the vastness of space, they had found trust, loyalty, and a connection that astonished everyone who knew their story. And as the stars stretched endlessly ahead, both knew that whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together.